Chirignan. Say it. Chirignan, French, is a flautist known for her musicality and versatility of repertoire. Her eclectic tastes have led to her to collaborate with many different performers and ensembles. As an orchestral player, she has performed with, to name a few, and there was a lot, the New York Chamber Players Orchestra, Albany Pro Musica, Octavio Chamber Orchestra, Glens Falls Symphony Orchestra. Darhon Rees-Rohrbach, yes, Welsh, was initially trained as a classical vocalist and pianist. She soon began harp studies. Darhon has published articles as well as a solo harp recording and performances, among many, at the National Eisteddfod in Wales, Binghamton Philharmonic, Greater Buffalo Opera, and the Utica Symphony, to name a few. And before I present them, Evan had a suitable limerick.
My husband is a flutist, so I particularly resonate here. And we found this. A tutor who tooted the flute tried to tutor two tutors to toot. Said the two to the tutor, is it harder to toot or to tutor two tutors to toot?
And I present STRINGWYNDE.
To hear me, or shall I use the microphone?
No, I can hear.
You can hear me okay? All right, I'd like to briefly say a few things about the harp in Wales. In 1945 AD, the laws of Wales actually said that for a gentleman, a harp, a cloak, and a chessboard were indispensable items. They actually had very small harps that were hollowed out of a single log that were strung with horsehair. This was in the Middle Ages. It was considered the golden age of Celtic harping. King Griffith of Wales in the 11th century actually employed harpists in his court. And this may have been the forerunner of royal patronage for harpers, which became the rule rather than the exception. Gerald of Wales, you've probably heard of him, lived in the 12th century. He describes young female harpers at the Welsh courts. I mentioned about the harps being strung of twisted horsehair, whereas in Ireland they were strung with metal, and in Scotland they use gut. So various things have been used to string harps. The harps of the period were all what they call single row diatonic. They had no mechanism by which to change the keys, so you had to retune the strings. And I'll talk about how this evolved. By the time we get to the Renaissance, you probably have heard the name Robert ap Hugh. He actually lived in the Renaissance, but he collected a lot of medieval harp music, and the music was written in tablature, showing like where to put your fingers on the strings, not modern notation. So a number of scholars have studied that manuscript and have figured out how to interpret it, and some have actually notated it into modern notation. Because the way it was written in the tablature is not something we would understand how to read now. And by the time we get to the Renaissance, different systems had been figured out trying to accommodate the growing chromaticism of music. This particular harp is known as a lever harp. It has a lever at the top of each string, and when I move the lever up, it shortens the vibrating length of the string. So by moving the levers on individual strings, I'm able to change the keys and pitches on this type of harp. This type of mechanism had its forerunner during the Renaissance period. There were various attempts. There was something called a hook harp, had hooks at the top. There was also a cross-strung harp, which had 2 rows of strings. a white row and a black row, so it was set up like the keys on a piano, where you have white keys and black keys, known as a cross-strung harp. In fact, there was a whole school of cross-strung playing. That particular style of harp was very popular in Spain during the Spanish Renaissance. But when we get to the Baroque period, in Italy, they invented something called the triple harp. I'm sure you've heard of that, yes? Yep. It had 3 rows of strings. The outer 2 strings were tuned in unison diatonically, and the middle row had the chromatics. So the easiest way to describe it is the outer 2 rows were tuned like the white keys on the piano, and then the inner row like the black keys. So the triple harp was invented in Italy, and in fact, the Handel Harp Concerto was actually premiered being played on a triple harp, if you've ever heard of that piece. Interestingly, the triple harp didn't take off that well in continental Europe, but it came to the UK and the Welsh adopted it, and it became the national instrument. In fact, it was so associated with the Welsh that it became known as the Welsh harp. Has anyone heard of the name Robin Hugh Bowen?
Yes. Seen
Yeah,
him.
Robin
Have we
is a-
seen him?
Robin
seen
is
him,
a
haven't we?
colleague of mine, right? In fact, my first harp lessons were given to me in Wales by Robin. Yeah, so that goes back a ways. Yeah, and Robin and I have been in contact, and I've stayed at his house, and he's become a good friend. So that's what happened. By the time we get to the classical period, the most famous name in Welsh music is somebody named Edward Jones. I know, a lot of Edward Jones. Yeah, Edward Jones had the bardic title of Bardd y Brenin, the King's Bard. He was actually the bard for the prince, but then when the prince became a king, then he became known as the King's Bard. He is important, and we're going to be playing several of his pieces today. He had a 3-volume collection, and I'm going to read you the names so I get it right. Musical and Poetical Relics of the Welsh Bards. All right. The tunes are very Welsh in manner, but they certainly were not any ancient relics. It was a collection of tunes. He may have written a few of them, but they were probably tunes already in existence that he collected, and he arranged them. It says you can play them on the harp or piano forte, as it was called back then. So what I have done is I have taken some of the tunes from his 3-volume collection, and I have arranged them for leather harp and flute, and so we're going to be playing some of those tunes. And then we'll play some of Edward Jones's tunes. Interestingly, all of the Welsh folk tunes that people know best are actually from Jones's collections. Name any Welsh tune, anyone?
All through the night.
Yeah, in the collection. Name another one. In the collection, and so on, all right? So, all the very famous Welsh tunes are found in his 3-volume collection. And it's kind of interesting that Edward Jones was born at the end of the Baroque period and lived into the classical period, but the way in which his tunes have been captured are very much in the Baroque style, the Baroque kind of counterpoint, bass lines. And in fact, when he wrote his collection, it was written in what's called figured bass, where you don't write out the left hand, you just use symbols to indicate what type of chords. And it's a real art to do what they call realizing the figured bass. How am I going to interpret these symbols? Because there are a lot of ways to interpret them. So, having said that, let's start with our first tune. This is known as David a Garreg Las. Can anyone tell me what that means?
Did you say David?
David a Garreg Las. David of the Blue Stone. You've probably heard of David of the White Rock?
Yes.
No? This is David of the Blue Stone. Okay. I think the Welsh have an affinity about the color blue because this one is called a Govid glass. The blue devils it means. We'll play a few more tunes and then I'll talk a little bit more. This is Sir Harry Lee. What does that mean? Sir Harry Black. Right, Sir Harry Lee. I should tell you a quick story about Sir. I was in Wales competing at Eisteddfod. Preliminary rounds were held in the chapel. My husband was with me. He's German, looks very German. Thinks very German. Anyway, so the sexton of the chapel was looking him up and down like this. You could see his mind. Clearly, this man is not Welsh. So he walked to my husband and he said, "Sir, are you Welsh?" And my husband said, "No, but my wife is." And he said, "All right then." True story. I still remember that. In his accent, it was a particular local accent. This is what they call a walking bass, and that was very characteristic of Baroque music. So I was trying to capture that in this particular arrangement. Again, there would have been figured bass cymbals, so it's kind of up to the performer to sort of figure out how they're going to do that. Okay. Oh, this is a beautiful, I love this melody. All right. It's a beautiful, haunting melody. We don't need to do the repeats on this.
Okay.
It's called Morva Friedland, which means the March of Friedland. All collected by Edward Jones, and from his 3-volume collection that has like hundreds of tunes in it. So these are just selected ones to give a nice variety. You have no Welsh blood in your body, not one drop, I guarantee.
That's me.
Yeah,
Okay.
they like this. You can come along if you want. We're going to do that refrain again. I should mention that Melanie and I, we share the melody. For example, in that second half where we had like the variations, I had down low in the harp. I was playing the melody. I think people were confused. And she actually had a counter melody
Yeah.
that I wrote.
Ah.
Yeah, a little counter melody. I like to write a lot of counter melodies for the
She
flute.
does, yeah.
Okay, some of you may know this tune. It's a common vocal song that people sing. Okay, yeah, and I think we'll do the repeats because it's a little peppier. tune. Oh, it's called Mentra Gwen, or Venture Gwen. This man tries to say to Gwen in the song lyrics that he's bragging about the things that he has, all right? And she's like, you know, get away, buddy. And then finally he says to her, you know, if you come and marry me, I will make you queen of the castle and all the lands that I own. And that was the clincher for her. Okay, I love these beautiful slow airs of Wales in the minor key. All right, so this is one of those.
Are we doing a piece?
No, I don't think we need to. Hold on a second.
Bit of Tom Jones song.
That was Divianw Griffith ap Cynan, which is delight of Griffith, son of Conan. All right, I think we'll finish up Jones with this one, and then we'll move to the other guy, okay?
Tom Jones song.
Yeah, Tom Jones, all right. Edward Jones, okay. Megan. Don't know if you've been aware of it, but a lot of these songs you can tell would have been suitable for dancing. Yeah. Some obviously the slow air is more like a pavan kind of dance, and then this one would have been more of an up-tempo dance. Now some of you may have been wondering, you may have seen me moving my hand to move levers to change the pitches. Also I was doing a technique known as a harmonic, where you damp the string halfway, and then you pluck it, and you get a sound that's an octave higher. So that's a little effect that you can do on a string instrument that you can't do on other instruments, known as a harmonic. And that's something that we like to do with the harp for effect. It gives like a little bell-like character. And also in the one song you saw me do, everybody loves that, right? And pieces. All right. So I need to change some levers here to get back to. We're going to go to a different fellow here. So let me change some levers. Okay. In addition to Edward Jones, there was another big collection by a guy named Nicholas Bennett. Has anyone ever heard of him? He lived in the classical period, and he collected, again, hundreds of tunes. These are they're later, so they're a little more classical, more Mozartian in their character. And so we're going to play some tunes from his collection. And then I understand when we're done, Susan, we'd like to finish with the national anthem, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, and that will be accompanied by flute and harp, of course, right? And when we sing it, we will sing the refrain twice, just to give you the heads up. Okay. So, interestingly about all of these tunes, they typically have names of things that were known to the local people, like place names. Or a lot of the tunes have rural names, like one of the songs we played from Jones was A Man on a Horse. So a lot of these were agricultural scenes, you might say. So this particular one is about some men from Dogethi, all right, Dogethi we might say in English, but anyway, called The Delight of the Men. Okay. We're going to play a few more tunes from Nicholas Bennett, but if we'd be done enough.
No, continue. But just give me a break before you play the national anthem.
Oh, okay, fine. We'll let you know. No, we'll play. Let's skip.
Skip it. Okay.
Yeah, we're just. Hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, why don't we do this one?
Great. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. 1 and 2 and. called Yash Moira, or the Earl of Moira, it means. Okay, we're going to do another little slower one. Kari Anakoi, which means courting in the wood. Levers, you've probably seen the big concert harps, like with orchestras. Well, concert harps have a system of pedals, and that wasn't invented till like early 1800s, what they call the double action pedal harp. During Mozart's time, they started to invent the single action, which meant you could go in one direction. With the double action pedal harp, you can have flats, naturals, and sharps just by moving your feet, and there are 7 pedals that correspond to the 7 notes of the musical scale, A through G. So your feet are moving while your hands are playing. This is more cumbersome because you have to be lifting up and manually doing that. So that's why most of the lever harp music is Celtic music or things that are more diatonic, because the chromaticism became a problem, which is why they invented things like the cross-strung harp, the triple harp, in an attempt to try to figure out a way to accommodate the accidentals. I should mention with the triple harp, it's not possible to play exclusively on the middle rows because your fingers literally go between. So you can only play in like 3 closely related keys, and that's how they were tuned. For example, Robin Hugh Bowen does almost all Celtic music, and he plays in the keys of C, G, and D. So there's very little movement in accidentals. He just has to reach in occasionally to pluck the correct string for that key. But he would have to retune his strings partially if he were to play in the flat keys, for example. I have my harp tuned in E flat because I play a lot of classical music and a lot of the songs from both Edward Jones and Nicholas Bennett were actually written in flat keys, like E flat, B flat. The flat keys are very warm keys for the harp. All right, I think we'll finish up with Jones from this song. This is a fun song. It's called A Cruth Hallen. What does that mean? A Cruth Hallen. The salt box. They didn't have salt shakers back then. They had a box with salt in it, with a spoon. And it was very ceremoniously carried to the table, especially if you had guests for dinner. And then you stopped at the plate, and the person took some salt and salted their food, and then the person moved to the next person. And that's how it was. So this is actually called the salt box. And in this particular tune, when we get in the middle of, you may notice there's like a hesitation at the end of the measures, and that's very intentional, because he's stopping at the plate of the guest to let him take some salt. Yeah, so it's not that we've messed up on our rhythm.